Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gregory Holtz, Diversity and Inclusion Liaison, and today's Diversity Speaks series is the state of Black Pennsylvania. This is a recorded session, so please be respectful and place yourself on mute during the presentation. If anyone has any captions or needs any captions for this presentation, it can be accessed by pressing the More tab, which is the three consecutive dots in the upper right-hand corner, then Language and Speech, and finally turn on Live Speech. If you have any questions, which we do encourage, please place them in the chat, and we will try to address them at the end. Now, let me introduce to you the Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, Chad Dion Lasser, for opening remarks. The floor is yours, Edie Lasser.
Thank you so much, Gregory. And I want to thank you and, as always, Stacy Waters and Director Amanda Brothman, our Director of Communications, for creating the space and the format for us to have this. I want to welcome everyone into the virtual beloved community here at the PHRC. I want to also just acknowledge the staff for just taking pause out of your day with the important work that you are driven to do here at the PHRC to join us. I'm so happy to have a dear colleague, someone that I admire, someone that I look up to, and someone that even before coming to the Commonwealth, I admired and some of the work that I did with the American Red Cross of Southeastern Pennsylvania. This is a timely virtual PHRC Diversity Speaks event, and it's a timely report that Senator Art Haywood put together on the state of Black Pennsylvania, along with just us being in this space to listen, to learn from him. And so put on your metaphoric seatbelts because he is just a servant leader. He's a public servant, and he is just a tremendous policy person. And this is no hyperbole and no placating. Once again, just want to thank everyone for being here. And lastly, want to thank Laura. The PHRC staff know that I always talk about just how important ASL is. It's a gift. It's as well as a discipline. So Laura, I say to you, thank you for being in this space with us here at the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission on this day during this time. And so once again, thank you for allowing me this space, Gregory, to welcome everyone into this beloved community virtual.
Absolutely. Thank you, Edie Lasser, for those opening remarks. Senator Art Haywood represents Northwest Pennsylvania and the Eastern Montgomery County and Pennsylvania's 4th Senate District. Senator Haywood has authored the State of Black Pennsylvania Report, Poverty Tour Report, and Campaigns for Compassion, a Morehouse College, London School of Economics and Political Science, and a University of Michigan Law School alum. He is married to Julie Haywood and has 3 grown children. Please help me welcome Senator Art Haywood. Senator Haywood, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much, especially thank you, Chad, for allowing me to have this conversation with your team. And thank you to all of you all at the Human Relations Commission. This work that you do is so critical. For many years, I was a litigator, and the PHRC was investigating and mediating and settling cases that I was involved in. So it's a long tradition of activism, and I'm glad to join you. I've been in the state Senate for 9 years now, and about this time last year, I think it was December or so of 2022, I decided that we needed to get a State of Black Pennsylvania report. And I had a tremendous research team with the Senate Democratic Caucus, and they did all the research for the report. And our report was then released in February, the last day of Black History Month. And we've been to a number of cities and had a number of virtual conversations to present the report. We had a presentation in Erie, Allentown, Pittsburgh, Reading, Lancaster, and Scranton, and a number of virtual presentations, as I mentioned already. Now, when I looked at this report, there's been a history of reports on State of Black Pennsylvania, State of Black America, primarily been done by the Urban League, the National Urban League. And they did what is typical, the Black to white comparison. And most of the comparisons of Black status and progress are Black to white. Now, this is very challenging because any kind of snapshot that's Black to white does not take into account 200 years of enslavement, 100 years of segregation, and current systemic discrimination. And so these snapshots, points in times, never take into account the long history of racial oppression. So I thought it was more important that we do a black to black comparison, which is looking at how African Americans, their condition in 2010 versus 2021, basically a decade. We've had a decade of improvement or not. Um, any family is pretty much looking at how they're doing over time. I know that's what we do in my family. And we don't try to find some kind of white family to do a comparison. We see how our family is making progress over time. Now, this report is about 28 pages. It is not comprehensive. That is, we cover health, we cover socioeconomic, we cover a number of topics, but not all the topics. And this is a 28-page report, not a 128-page report. And we had tremendous staff to do the work, mostly relying on census and other information. When the report was released and I looked at it, there were several surprising facts that I'd like to highlight in our conversation today. But in each of our conversations that I've had, we had a significant time for feedback and response, and I hope that we have such time for that today. So here are a few of the what I would call surprising facts. First is mass incarceration. I know you've all heard that mass incarceration is a serious problem in the African American community and in the American community. However, in Pennsylvania, African American incarceration in between 2010 and 2021 went down 32%, 8,000 individuals down. This is a major challenge to the mass incarceration conversation, but it also shows that here in Pennsylvania, as opposed to any other state or even national, the incarceration of African Americans went down 32%, 8,000 people. That is dramatic. This result of a number of state policies that I'll be glad to talk about further. Another significant change was income. African Americans earning over $100,000 a year went up dramatically, significantly, I would say, between 2010 and 2021, more than the rate of inflation. Most of the story we get about African Americans is what they don't have and poverty, but high earners, those households over 100,000 went up significantly. Black median income also went up from 31,000 to 42,000 during this decade. Black poverty went down by about 55,000 households, about a 14% decrease. The number of insured African Americans went down dramatically. So now we only have about 6% uninsured. When we started the decade, it was about 15% uninsured. We know that Obamacare had a lot to do with getting folks insured. Now, on the other hand, we had some significant challenges. One, home ownership went slightly down, and that is obviously a challenge for us. Hate crimes went up dramatically. We know that is largely related to the failed leadership of 45. In the area of education, particularly African American men in higher education, up dramatically. African American women in higher education also up dramatically. So we get these real numbers on the state of African Americans over those 10 years. In many respects, incarceration down, income up, insured up, are contrary to the common story in the media about the condition of African Americans in the United States. Now, typically, the African American description is a national one, not a state one. And this is one of the reasons I thought it was so important that we take a careful look at Pennsylvania. Now, obviously, there are a number of dramatic challenges that we still have. Having more people insured is important. Access to healthcare still has to be addressed. Now, we had a number of recommendations at the many roundtables. I just want you to know that For these roundtables, I and my team traveled well over 1,000 miles going to these various cities across the state. I'd like to briefly share some of the recommendations that came from individuals at the roundtables. One was a demand for equitable funding of public education. Everyone was really clear that public education is the foundation of opportunity and that resources are important. Another recommendation was to increase the minimum wage to a family sustaining wage so that the minimum income is up and therefore everybody above the minimum income could also be up. There was a request for more affordable housing as part of the solution, particularly given the challenges to the declining home ownership that we found in the report. There was a lot of support for the whole home repair program introduced by my colleague, Senator Saval, which provides up to $50,000 for individuals to fix their homes so they can stay in their homes. A couple more points that were raised during the roundtables. Another was support for more African American women, contraceptive care, prenatal care. I think we all may know by now that maternal morbidity is a serious problem nationally, and especially here in Pennsylvania. So those are some of the recommendations that came out of those roundtables. My staff and I are working closely with the Shapiro administration to look at some of these recommendations and what they can advance as the Shapiro administration. I'm optimistic that we will get some of our recommendations adopted. Finally, before I go into Q&A, I would like to share that it looks like the report has been shared through the chat. I encourage folks to read it. It's not super long. Again, it's only about 28 pages, and we have a lot of graphics, hopefully to make it easier for folks to read and grasp. For me, one of the big features of this, though, is looking at Black to Black progress in those 10 years. And I've asked people to make a commitment that this decade that we are currently in be better than the last. And we can see where we are in certain respects with this report so that we're in a position to say we were either better in this decade or worse than the last. At that point, I'd be glad to take any questions or comments. Tyrone Manning is on my team with us to help take notes as we finish our report. We are going to release an update in February that will talk about what we learned through the multi-city tour, as well as these virtual conversations, and what we should be focusing on next. That's pretty much my presentation, but I'd be glad to have further conversation about what's in the report or suggestions or ideas or comments. I'll now turn it back over to Greg.
Thank you, Senator Haywood, for that report. Now, I think this is a very important time that we ask questions in the open Q&A. So if you want to, please come up off the mic. You're going to mute yourself one at a time. We'll ask questions. And if not, you can put them in the chat and I'll read them for you. We have a question already from Nancy. As someone who worked for 13 years in correction, I know that the trends in a lot of states have been moving from incarceration to supervision. Municipalities, counties, and states have found incarcerating costs than money, where most probationers, have a fee to be on supervision. Would you consider looking at the numbers of Black people on supervision in the future reports?
So I can't say what I will exactly cover in the next report, so I don't want to commit to that. However, I will say that in Pennsylvania, we just passed probation reform legislation, which the governor signed last week. I was at a ceremonial signing with Meek Mill and other leaders. So I do believe that the legislation that we just passed will create a downward trend for those under supervision. And we estimated there are about 100,000 individuals would be benefited from the legislation. So I think for that one, I would probably take a look at it maybe 8 or 9 years after the legislation has been adopted in order to see whether those on supervision are going down as a result of the legislation. The incarceration went down for a number of reasons. We had legislation that encouraged diversion, a couple rounds of legislation that encouraged diversion and created financial incentives for diversion. So that's part of the reasons that the 8,000 folks, African Americans, are not incarcerated now. I just want to share one thing more about incarceration. Pennsylvania was on a path to get to about 50,000 incarcerated overall, Black, white, all races. We are now well under 40,000. So the trajectory of going up is now a trajectory of going down. To me, that is the most important feature here, is that we are on a trajectory to move down, which would suggest that when we get to 2030, we'd even have further declines.
For our next question, what is being done to formulate an equitable funding formula? The Commonwealth Court ordered that it be fixed. What are the next steps?
So we currently have a fair funding formula commission in the House and the Senate that's looking at the distribution of the public education money and the adequacy of the public education money. I would anticipate that the commission will come out with a report in 2024 and that it could be part of the budget process that ends in June. So I say that's the immediate next step. The commission coming up with the new recommendations for fair funding and then seeing to what extent the General Assembly will fund it. Now, I do want to share something about where Pennsylvania ranks in terms of public ed funding. My office has indicated that Pennsylvania is number 8 in the nation per capita, per person. That deals with the fact that we got a lot of people here. We are 8th in the nation in public education per capita. So I think part of our obviously challenge is distribution, because we've been noted as the most inequitable funding in the nation. So we got a long way to go, but that's the immediate next step.
And I know there's more questions, but I actually had a question that kind of ties into what you just said.
Sure.
Our office actually got your report when it first came out. We were kind of analyzing it. And that's one of the things that I noticed, that even though there's more Black students attaining their, college or associate's degree, there's a massive number of Black students who are not even attaining their high school degree, which is kind of a pigeonhole. I mean, you can't get to college if you can't have your high school degree. And so what steps do you think that we need to take to really kind of ensure our young Black students are attaining their high school degree? And do you think that mentorship should come into play at this point?
Yeah, thanks so much. So if you look at the decade of 2010 to 2021, the percentage of African Americans graduating from high school went up overall. Now, that doesn't mean there's not people not making it, but I just talk about just want to describe. I just want to be clear: the number of African Americans graduating from high school has been going up really for about 50 or 60 years. Now, how do you deal with those? How do you improve the conditions for those who have been left behind? And as I agree with you 100%, there are a numbers of our people that are being left behind in public education. So that's a complex question, and I'll try to give you a relatively short answer I'll try to do that. So 9th grade is the grade of greatest dropout. They don't make it from 8th to 9th, or they stay in 9th a while and don't finish. And that transition from 8th to 9th grade is critical. I think that mentoring young people at that period of time, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, is critical to keep people in high school. That is the critical period, as opposed to 3rd grade, 4th grade, or preschool. I'm all for preschool investment, but preschool investment doesn't necessarily mean kids not gonna drive out in ninth grade, right? You're dealing with somebody who's 4 versus somebody who's 13 or 14. So I do think that mentoring, particularly in middle school, 7, 8, 9, critical for reducing dropouts.
Someone has their hand up, so you can come off and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Melissa Kornick. I'm a strategic communications specialist for diversity and inclusion. I just had a couple of questions, and I've been bringing this up lately in meetings. Some way to look at issues with home ownership by Blacks and discrimination, because in the past, I say 60 years or so, there are vastly more people owning homes than renting. Especially in Pennsylvania, because there's just been so much development. So I wanted to ask about that. And the second point I wanted to bring up is assistance for senior citizens, for the same reason that there are far more seniors now, and not just in Pennsylvania, but around the world. Countries are seeing that they're aging out, they're having issues with, fulfilling employment and things. But for seniors who are aging out, what kinds of issues are they dealing with in terms of discrimination against Blacks?
Thank you so much. So this report doesn't, obviously, as you know, look at the question of seniors. I am on the Aging Committee of the State Senate, so we can look more into that. And I think that would be a one I would need to get back to you on. In terms of the home ownership in Pennsylvania, so African American home ownership at the beginning of the decade in 2010 was 47.2% of the population. 47.2% of African Americans in Pennsylvania, adults, were homeowners. At the end of the decade in 2021, it was 44.7, about 45%. So we had, a little bit more than, almost a 3%, a little bit more 2% drop. So we still have a significant percentage, 44, almost 45% of African Americans as homeowners. Now, to shift that, discrimination is a component of lack of African American home ownership. And that's discrimination in terms of home buying, that's discrimination in terms of lending challenges and redlining. So so we definitely need more enforcement action against lenders, more litigation against realtors to help stop to send a message that this type of discrimination is not permissible. I was a victim of housing discrimination. I'm not going to really get into that now. But I think definitely enforcement action against these discriminatory lenders and realtors is part of the strategy to increase African American home ownership.
I have one more follow-up regarding protections and services to those who, I'm in Bucks County, where the numbers of Blacks living here has decreased. It was 6% and now it's down to 3%. And there have been cases of people who were discriminated against by, police services and other types of groups where they're supposed to seek help. They're not able to do so, or they're treated in a certain way. So when I look at private home ownership, I'm looking at, well, how are they treated when they have an issue that they have to report?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so there's systemic racism in the United States. So these issues of treatment persist. This report, we didn't get into that level of detail. But as a general principle, there is systemic racism in the United States of America, and that persists. And the hate crime incidents are some examples of that treatment. And the hate incidents went up dramatically in the decade.
Okay. Melissa, you're next with your question, please.
I just asked my question.
Okay, we'll move on back to the chat.
Thank you.
Not a problem. The next question, how is this report being shared with community members? Are any efforts being made to mobilize true grassroots initiatives around correcting issues highlighted within the data?
Yeah, thanks so much. So we are sharing the reports in virtual sessions like this one, as well as I mentioned, we did a roundtable discussion, Allentown, Scranton, Lancaster, Reading, Erie, and Pittsburgh. We are encouraging, it's on my website, and we have tried to encourage people to read it and become aware of it. And certainly thank you all for inviting me to this conversation to do the same. I don't want to get into what's true and not true leadership. So I don't know what that, I couldn't make a statement on that. However, in several of these places that we have visited, local leaders have come together and decided that they wanted to take some action in their local communities to improve conditions. That really pretty much depends upon local leadership to advance initiatives in their communities. I do not pretend to be the local leader for 2,200 or more municipalities across Pennsylvania. But what I can do is share changing conditions and hopefully some recommendations that folks in their local communities might be able to follow. My office is going to begin in 2024 a series we're calling the Dignity Series, in which we will try to bring some of the people who were part of the roundtable discussions together to talk about initiatives and share ideas, what's working, what's not working. And we'd be glad to invite any folks on this call, obviously with the permission of Chad, for participation in that ongoing conversation.
All right. I see someone has their hand raised. You can come off and mute, if you will.
I apologize if you already answered this, but I noticed in your report that you mentioned that there was a growth of 8,000 Black male residents in Pennsylvania and a loss of 32,000 Black female residents in Pennsylvania. Do you have any idea why that's happening?
That's thank you so much for that question. So I do not have an answer or really an idea as to why there's been some migration in and out. I would say that those numbers, given the overall number of African Americans in the state, I don't know how significant it is. I mean, those are 8,000, 32,000. It sounds like large numbers, but when you look at it, well over a million people, I'm not sure how statistically significant that is. Although it's obviously significant for all those families and the neighborhoods that lost these individuals. Excuse me. But I don't have a rationale or explanation for the in-migration, out-migration that I can share today.
Thank you.
I will say this as a big picture framework in terms of Pennsylvania being a hospitable state. So Pennsylvania overall is a state that has, we're in the top 5 of having folks over 60. And we're going to have even a greater percentage of individuals over 60 in the next 10 years, over 25%. So we're an older state compared to many of our competing states. In addition, we have a minimum wage that's extremely low, $7.25, lowest in the nation. And all the surrounding states have a higher minimum wage. And so obviously that can be a reason for some low paying people to go to New York or New Jersey or Delaware or Maryland or West Virginia or Ohio. They all pay more if you're in a low pay situation. But beyond that, Pennsylvania is having some challenges holding on to young people, particularly those who finish higher education. And that's a challenge for actually Black and white Pennsylvanians.
For our next question, can you speak to any jobs or industries where Black people are experiencing higher rates of employment or income?
That's an excellent question, as have the other ones been. And I do not have that analysis in terms of which occupations are more, where more African Americans are in certain occupations. Other than, unfortunately, a number of African Americans are still concentrated in some of the low pay occupations of janitorial services, in the hospitality, in the hotel hospitality industry. Now, I want to highlight that the position of African Americans in some of these low pay occupations is a direct result of enslavement, a direct result of enslavement, because African Americans were prohibited from many of the high paying occupations up until the mid 1960s and early 70s. So that is a core reason why we have been in many of these low pay occupations. And there's quite a bit of competition, as you know, for the higher paying occupations. And that's also, we have had to unfortunately deal with employment discrimination as well. But excuse me, still recovering from a cold. But we can get that. We can follow up with that response to that question about occupational distribution of African Americans in Pennsylvania. I believe we can get that. I know we have that nationally. We'll see if we can get that information for Pennsylvania.
Kind of a follow-up as well. Is there, I don't remember seeing this in the report. Is there any kind of statistic about for the individuals who are going on to get their graduate or their master's degree, do we have a breakdown of what Black students are picking as the degree? Because that also affects, leading into the job market.
Yeah, thanks so much. So that is not in the report, although I have seen it. And so I should be able to get that more quickly than some of the other information. But I have seen the degree distribution for African Americans and what those degrees lead to. I should be able to get that as well. Thank you.
Senator Haywood, I don't want to get ahead of the context as it relates to our forthcoming report on enough as it pertains to racism on college campuses, but I do see an intersection. And I was wondering if you could speak to if college campuses, predominantly white college campuses, and the towns, which oftentimes are synonymous with some of the microaggressions, the hatred, the venom, and the racism on college campuses, if they are a microcosm and they mirror one another, how does that feed into the overall aspect of Pennsylvania not being welcoming for Black and brown individuals, and in particular, Black individuals that will say, okay, because Pennsylvania, excuse me, is so racially polarizing, I'm going to go somewhere else. Would you be able to speak to that? Because I
Certainly.
see a lot of intersection, and not everyone is aware, and I definitely don't want to use this format for that, but I also defer to you. I don't think everyone is aware of what you and I and Jude and the special assistant to the executive director of the PHRC embarked upon over the past year and a half. I mean, this report, I'm not trying to jinx this, is a game changer, and it's going to speak volumes to all of what we're seeing manifesting itself at Harvard, MIT, and University of Penn. We saw it before these incidents occurred. So am I kind of all this stuff up here? If you could just speak to that. I'm sorry if I was inarticulate and bringing out what I'm thinking, but in my heart, I think there's a lot of intersection between your report, our forthcoming report, and how Pennsylvania is not inviting for a lot of people, but in particular on these college campuses.
Yeah. So let me respond to that as well as a prior question from Greg, because I do recall, I looked at some quick notes, that African American college students were significantly concentrated in social service degrees. a range of social service degrees from criminal justice to social work, or a range. Um, and these social service degrees are very important for helping people, critical for helping people, but not as high paying as some other degrees. So that is one characteristic, Greg, that I hope responds to your question about the distribution of African American college students' degrees. There's a higher percentage in social service for blacks than for whites, I believe. So I hope that's a partial question answered. Now, on the question of college campuses, Chad and I have traveled over 3,000 miles to the state system schools, the state universities, Kutztown, Shippensburg, Bloomsburg, and the like. And unfortunately, what we found was uh, pretty much a consistent pattern of African Americans facing some level of racial harassment, higher or lower, but some level of racial harassment. And some students withdrawing and transferring as a result of the treatment. I'm really not sure how the Pennsylvania experience compares to others. So I don't know if I went to Ohio, if that would be better or worse, in New York, if it would be better or worse. So it's hard for me to say that the Pennsylvania experience is worse than surrounding states. So that I don't know. So I don't want to go that far. However, I would say the Pennsylvania experience is bad, and those, in many respects, and those who are aware of it would not be inviting. Um, but given the history of racism in the United States, uh, I would think that, and I grew up in Ohio, and I would think I would think there's racial harassment in Ohio, higher education. I went to law school at the University of Michigan. I would not, I would think that there's racial harassment in higher education in Michigan. And those are the two places where I have some familiarity. So it's a national problem. I think the important thing, one of the many important things we've done is that we have focused on it in Pennsylvania in a way that we can change it. That to me is a dramatic and significant impact of our work that can make things better for students going forward.
Thank you so much for that answer. Anthony, you're next with your question, sir.
Good afternoon, Senator Haywood. It's a pleasure to listen to you today. I guess in light of our current political situation and moving forward to this coming November, what are your biggest concerns as we come to grips with the possibility of 45 being reelected? And what potential effects do you see on the aforementioned statistics impacting the Black communities, nationally as well as locally?
Yeah, thanks. So I know that this is a nonpartisan event, and I definitely want to keep it so. So November 24 has quite a bit at stake for the nation and for African Americans and Black people here in Pennsylvania. So I think our core choices are going to be between candidates who have done something positive, but not enough, and a candidate who has done almost very little positive and trying to send us back. So how African Americans understand that difference, I think, is going to be critical because party affiliation is becoming less and less important in the United States, particularly for those who are under 30 years old. So calling, somebody's got to calling all Democrats, and that's not going to be enough people answering that call for a Democrat to win. And I would say the same thing for Republicans. Calling all Republicans, not going to be enough. Our voting statistics in Pennsylvania show an increasing number of independents, especially with young people. And so that's going to be a key demographic to win. Winning the independents is going to be key to the outcome of this election. And both candidates are going to have to demonstrate, in part for their record, but also in part in what they project, what they have done to improve the condition of African Americans. And hopefully, folks will vote accordingly. There is, in terms of what I worry about, I think probably one of the things I worry about is the use of misinformation to get people to vote one way or another. Misinformation was effectively used in 2016 to discourage some voters, to get them to stay home. And that to me is my greatest concern, is that misinformation is going to cause people to stay home, not vote. And I'm a big advocate for participating in voting, but I know people can get fed up and discouraged. And a lot of misinformation over social media is intended for that purpose, and it's often effective.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's another question in the chat. It reads, during a particular past administration, PA state mental health hospitals were limited or closed. Those individuals were released without support services. Also working in past corrections, it appears majority of the subsequent crimes were committed by persons that had one or more mental health problems. What could be done, or what is being done to assist in serving those individuals? And before you answer that, I think that this question kind of wraps in with the previous question of why certain African Americans are going into social services to kind of like help this bottom end, but you can speak more to that.
Yeah, I am a big proponent of individuals getting involved in social services. It's critical for when I left law school, I was committed to working to represent the indigent, and I did so at community legal services to help people save their homes from mortgage foreclosure. So it's a noble activity. Now, I will say that when I compare my income to those of my law school classmates, it's a lot lower. And so there was a cost associated with doing the social service, social uplift activity. I'm a witness to it, so I understand that. But it does play out in terms of these overall statistics about how much money we have, as well as what the value of money may or may not be in the end. Mental health. So I went to a tremendous, this is not on the State of Black Pennsylvania report, but I went to a tremendous training in Miami where they have probably the best in the nation program to divert people with mental health conditions out of the criminal justice system. And there's an effort to try to make the Miami experience a national model, which I think it is, and get it adopted in more places. And there are a number of folks from Pennsylvania who were at this conference to learn about how we can have a better diversion program. I do think that diversion based upon that conference is a tremendous way to get individuals the help that they need and to get them out of incarceration. Significant percentage of individuals in incarceration unfortunately have serious and mental health issues, and it's not really a place to get treated. Prison is not a place to get treated, although they're doing it. It's not really, obviously, it's not really a place to get treated. So I would say that in terms of what's happening in Pennsylvania, given the number of people from Pennsylvania that attended this conference, I would say there's hopefully Pennsylvania will follow the leadership of those who are in Miami and begin to adopt a mental health diversion programs that work. We have seen the model. Hopefully we will adopt it.
Absolutely. Is there any other questions that we have? Any other questions? Well, just in case people are thinking, I kind of wanted to ask you one last question about, I found it interesting about how, when you said the ninth grade is the greatest dropout rate, and that it's critical that we kind of focus and help 7th through 9th graders. Now, is that just seen in the African American community, or is that just regardless of color? Did you see any difference? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, thanks so much. So this framework of 7th and 9th grade was shared with me in the context of a number of conversations with African American professionals. So I can't say it applies beyond that, though it may. But my conversations were limited to African American educators who shared this with me. So I can't say it's beyond African Americans, but it certainly could be.
Well, Senator Haywood, thank you so much for your presentation, your in-depth information, that wonderful Q&A. We just, from the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, we just definitely want to thank you for your time, your effort, and your information. Edie, I'm going to pass it back to you, sir.
And I'm gonna pass it back to you because you summed it up with your brilliance. And just as we conclude for the year, want to just thank you, Gregory. Want to thank Stacy. Want to thank Director Desiree Chang and Director Amanda Brothman for what has been successful, in my earnest opinion, successful PHRC Lunch and Learns, successful PHRC Diversity Speaks. And Senator Haywood, you know, you and I will be working on something probably tomorrow. Be blessed, sir, and thank you for all that you do for the people of the Commonwealth and all that you do for me as well. Thank you for everyone who has tuned in here. And if we don't see you the rest of this week, we wish everyone a beautiful upcoming holiday. And so once again, take care. This is recorded. In the words of Director Amanda Brothman, follow us on all platforms and social media, with the exception of TikTok. We're not on that. We're not on that, but we are on Twitter. We are on what Twitter is now X. We're on Instagram. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook. Also follow Senator Art Haywood. They have a robust social media platform as well. Take care, everyone, and take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones as well. Thank you so much.